This is the first video tutorial for the grade 9 unit on linear relations. And the first important skill we're going to go over in this video is how to find an equation from a given table of values. And you'll notice I changed the title actually to say finding a linear equation from a table of values. Linear means that if you were to graph an equation, you would get a line or a straight line as opposed to a curve. Dealing with nonlinear equations or graphs that look like a curve, you start to deal with in high school, in grade 10. Now, the good news for finding a linear equation is that they're always written in the same style. And the general version of it is y equals mx plus b, where x and y represent your x and y coordinates on the Cartesian plane, and then m is a number. In fact, it's our coefficient. That's the number that's being multiplied by the variable. And then b is our constant. So for example, our equation could be y equals 3x plus 2, and in this case, the value of m would be 3, or the coefficient is 3, and then our constant is, or b value, is positive 2. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple examples to see how we find this equation if we're given a list of values. Okay, here's our first example. Now to start off, we know the equation is going to be in that style that we just went over, where it's y equals our coefficient times x plus or minus our constant. Now to find our first mystery number, this coefficient, it's actually quite easy. The coefficient is how much our y value, so these values, are changing each time. If they are increasing each time, then that means our coefficient would be positive, and if they were decreasing, then that would make our coefficient negative. So let's take a look at this example. We start with 4, and it becomes 7, 7 becomes 10, and 10 becomes 13. So I can see right away that we're actually adding each time, and to be exact, we're adding 3. So since 3 is being added each time, our coefficient in the equation is going to be positive 3. And of course, you don't need to write the plus symbol in front. It's just 3x. Now, to figure out the constant, what we need to do is actually pick one of our x values and multiply it by 3, because we know that that needs to happen so far. So let's pick, well, you know what, honestly, the easiest one to pick with, if there's an x value of 1, it's pretty smart just to pick that, because that's easy to do. So what is 3 times 1? Well, 3 times 1 gets me 3. Let's write it over here. 3 times 1 gets me 3. But now, the whole point of what we're trying to do is figure out how do we manipulate x to become y in each of these situations. How do we get from 2 to 7? How do we get from 3 to 10, 4 to 13? And in this top case, from 1 to 4. Now, we know the first thing we need to do is multiply by 3. So if we did multiply this by 3, we get 3. And now we need to ask ourselves, how do we get from 3 to 4 using addition or subtraction? Well, it's easy. You just add 1. So that means our constant is a positive 1, so plus 1. So that means our final equation is y equals 3x plus 1. And the great thing about this is that you can actually really quickly test to see that if you're correct or not, just by picking a different x value, following this formula, and seeing if you get the correct y value. For example, if I pick this x value of 4, okay, and the first thing we do is multiply it by 3. So I think to myself, what is 4 times 3? Well, it's 12. And then what happens when you add 1 to it? You get 13. And that's exactly the number that we wanted to get. So after you figure out the equation for a problem like this, it's a good idea just to check your answer with another x value. Let's try a couple more examples, and then we should be good. Okay, here's our new example. I'm going to start off by writing y equals something times x. Now, to figure out our coefficient, remember the first thing we need to do is figure out how much the y value is changing each time it steps down here. So in this case, I can see going from 3 to 1, we're actually decreasing, and we're decreasing by 2. So it's subtracting 2 each time. And that means our coefficient is going to be negative 2. Like I said before, if it's decreasing, that makes your coefficient negative. Now for the next step, we're going to actually pick one of our x values, and we're going to multiply it with the coefficient we just discovered, and that's negative 2. So like last time, it's easiest to pick the first one where x equals 1. So I need to multiply that by negative 2. And negative 2 times 1 gets me negative 2. Now I need to think, what can I add or subtract to negative 2 to end up with an answer of 3, or a y value of 3? Well, I know to get from negative 2 to 0, I'd have to add 2. So to get from negative 2 to 0, I have to add 2. And then to get from 0 to 3, I'd have to add 3 more. So in total, I'm actually adding 5. So that means our constant will be a positive 5. So that's our final equation. It's y equals negative 2x plus 5. And again, we're going to confirm our answer. I'm going to pick a different x value. This time let's pick, let's do x where x is 2. So the first thing I'm going to do is multiply it by negative 2. And I know that negative 2 times 2 gets me negative 4. And then the next thing you'd have to do is add 5 to it. And if we do negative 4 plus 5, you get positive 1. And that is, in fact, the correct answer we were hoping for, so we know we've done that correctly. Let's do one more quick question, and then that will be it for this video. Alright, so let's first off, remember the first thing we need to do is check and see how much our y value is increasing or decreasing. So we start at negative 4, it becomes negative 2, then 0, then positive 2. So I can see that that is increasing by 2 each time, which means our equation is going to start off as being y equals 2x. Next, I'm going to pick an x value and actually multiply it by 2. Let's say we're going to try 5. Actually, let's do one that has only positive y values. That might be easier to handle. So let's do it times 8. So what's 2 times 8? That gets me 16. Then we need to think, how do we get from 16 to 2 by adding and subtracting? Well, you would have to subtract the difference, which is 14. So that is our equation, y equals 2x minus 14. And real quick, we'll check our answer to make sure it's correct. Let's try it with 7. So I know 2 times 7 gets me 14. The next thing we have to do is subtract 14 from that, and we get 0, which is the correct answer that we were hoping for. So we got it correct. Alright, so hopefully if you follow that system and that method, you should always be able to find the linear equation that relates the x and y values in a given table of values.